This is World's Creepiest Stories. Now, one thing I'll say about this particular story is that at the end of it, the user provides quote unquote picture evidence of one of the shocking and unsettling events that occurred. And it's up for you to determine, how good that evidence is, but it's some degree of evidence nonetheless. So, anyway, according to this poster, who we'll call Derek, he says the home that he grew up in was once a pig slaughterhouse. And to give you a general sense of the layout, it had one floor, an unfinished basement, and six doors in total. And the place was sort of a creepy place to grow up. Frequently, Derek and his family experienced paranormal activity. And this mostly included the relatively common stuff, such as strange noises, misplaced items, doors opening, and voices. But most of it wasn't that intense. And ironically, the creepiest part of the entire house was not where you would expect. Like in most cases, people would think, the basement would be the creepiest part of the home. But in Derek's case, it was actually the first floor hallway where his bedroom was located. And according to what he says, he hated that hallway more than anything, and he was frankly terrified of it. So one night when he was around 13, he was in his bedroom on his computer when he began hearing strange noises out in the hallway that he could only describe as like stomping sounds. And these noises weren't really that loud, they were pretty subtle. But on top of this, his door handle kept jiggling a little bit. And he sort of assumed that it was his father or something. But sometime that night, Derek had to use the bathroom. And so he got up from his computer desk, walked across his room, and opened the door. And upon opening the door, he stepped out into the hall and took a look all around. But he didn't see or hear anything. And so then he just, turned on the hall light and went to go use the bathroom. And after using the bathroom, he opened the door, stepped back out into the hall, and took a look into the kitchen. The kitchen was, of course, at the end of the hall. After taking a look around, he glanced for a second at the island table right in the middle of the kitchen. And suddenly, he saw a shadowy figure crouching behind the island. Now, his first thought was that it was just his mom crouching down to pick something up. And so he called out, "Mom?" But there was no answer. So then he called out yet again a little louder, "Mom!" But yet again, he received no answer. And then in the blink of an eye, the figure shifted around a bit and came into the light of their security light that was shining through the kitchen window. And right away, Derek realized that the figure was not his mom. No. Whatever it was on all fours, and its legs were bent completely backwards. It didn't have hands, it only had feet, and no face either. And after witnessing this horrifying figure, Derek was in a state of complete and utter shock. He stood there looking at it, then slowly began walking backwards toward him. And as it did so, he suddenly heard a loud sound somewhere to his left. But before he could even see what it was, he found himself being pushed back into the bathroom, and then the bathroom door was slammed shut as he entered it. And then instantly, he heard the door open to his parents' room. And so he exited the bathroom, and he and his parents looked at each other. And they were each shocked to learn, for whatever reason, every single light in the house had all turned on at once. A kitchen, basement, garage, everything. And that night was a really strange and unsettling experience that neither he nor his parents could ever find a way to explain. His father chalked it up to Derek playing a prank on all of them, and he himself considered that perhaps there was like a power surge or something. But one of the oddest parts was that even the flashlights were turned on. So, anyway, fast forward to several years later in May of 2013. As one night, Derek was back home from college for a few days, and he went to sleep in his childhood bed. And pretty much as soon as his head hit his pillow, he heard some weird noises. So after hearing the noises, he sat up in bed, grabbed the remote, and muted his TV. Then suddenly, his bedroom door slammed shut by itself. And the next morning, he took some pictures of it, and here's one of the pictures. And as you can see, there's a bunch of scratches all over the door that weren't there before. In 2005, a 19-year-old Florida man was on a road trip to Alabama to visit some family members in Russellville. And as he drove in his green Mercury Sable along the interstate, it was beginning to get a little dark outside. And additionally, the man, who we'll call Dave, was getting a little tired because of all the driving. And because his car's heat didn't work, well, he was feeling a bit cold as well. So before long, he pulled off the interstate into some of the smaller roads, and then in turn, these led him into some gravel back roads. And meanwhile, Dave began to get really hungry, and the cold air became the only thing that was really keeping him awake. He also didn't have GPS at the time, and he was using these printed out paper sheets from a site called MapQuest, which, for those that don't know, is a website for directions. And people used to use it a lot for these long road trips. But then suddenly, while driving through these back roads, he caught sight of a beat up old country grocery store on the right hand side. And once Dave sees this, he's thinking, oh, thank God, I'm freaking starving. And then after he finally gets close enough, he to the grocery store, he pulls into the little parking lot and he gains a closer view of the store. And from what he can see at this point, it really is this kind of dingy old place. There's only a single sign above the building that says grocery, and there isn't even a real name. And while the sign is lit up, the interior doesn't seem to be very well lit at all. And overall, this sort of creeped him out a bit. Nevertheless, Dave was hungry, so he figured, what the heck, maybe it's a 24-hour store. And he opened up the door of his old Mercury Sable, got out of the car, and then began walking up to the entrance. And as he approaches the glass door of the store, he catches sight of a shadow and moves across the aisles inside. Now, Dave doesn't really make much of this at first, and he just opens the door and continues to make his way inside the building. And then after stepping on inside, he calls out, hello? Nobody answers. So then he says, I saw you when I pulled up. I was hoping you're still open. But yet again, Dave receives no answer. But he figures that perhaps the owner is like an old man or something and his hearing isn't all that great. So then he just decides to begin walking a little further on inside the little grocery store. The overall atmosphere is a little off. First of all, there's this incessant low-grade buzzing sound. Additionally, there's a bit of a bad smell. Either way, if you can at least grab some chips, that would satisfy him enough. So he continues browsing a bit. And then suddenly, a man appears from the back of the building. And Dave is a bit shocked for a second because the man he sees is a lot different from what he expected. He was expecting to see more of an elderly shop owner. But surprisingly, this guy looks to be more like maybe in his 30s or something. And the guy says to him,
I'm so sorry. We were just about to close. How can I help you?
To which Dave replies, yeah, I just came up from Florida. It's been a long drive. I was hoping you guys had something to eat for the trip.
We have plenty. What are you looking for exactly?
And when the man said this, he said it without taking his eyes off of Dave. Apparently, his eye contact was very direct, and he rarely blinked, and his smile was really odd and plastic. Because of these facts, Dave was a little freaked out about his demeanor. Nevertheless, he then responds to him, just some chips, maybe a Coke. You have Doritos? And the man says,
Of course.
and as he's saying this, he begins to walk past Dave towards the entrance of the store. And once he reaches the entrance, he locks the door and turns back around and explains,
Don't want anyone else walking in.
and the man starts strolling all the way to the back and tells Dave,
Well, follow me.
at this point, Dave's thinking, I don't know about this. I don't think it's normal for store owners to take you on guided tours through the store. But because he was a teenager and a bit naive and he didn't want to be impolite, he follows the man to the back. Once they get back there, there's like a bunch of those plastic flaps dividing the customer side and the back end of the building. And then the guy sticks his hand through the flaps, creates a bit of separation, and says,
Well, follow me.
meanwhile, Dave is really starting to get freaked out, especially once he notices a sharp change in the guy's demeanor. Apparently, the man was now kind of looking past him all around the store, like someone who's checking for police or something. And so he asked the guy, back there? And as he asks this, he starts to sort of back up a bit and suddenly spots a bag of chips on the side of the aisle. At the same time, the man apparently sees Dave spot the chips and he says,
Yeah, back here. We got our good stuff in the back. You can come take your pick.
by this point, Dave finally realized what that buzzing sound was that he heard when he first entered the store. He looks over at the dimly lit meat section and sees a bunch of flies hovering over the meat. It's most certainly rotten. So now he's like, okay, I gotta get out of here. And he just takes a bag of chips off the shelf next to him and finally replies, I'll just take this bag if it's all right. He starts slowly backing up towards the entrance of the store. Meanwhile, the man is trying to usher him back, saying,
Well, trust me, those are no good. I have way better stuff back here.
Finally, Dave pats the side of his jeans and says, Oh man, I forgot my wallet in my car. I'll be right back. And he quickly, turns around and begins lightly jogging in the direction of the entrance. As he approaches the door, he's gradually picking up speed until ultimately he reaches the door, twists the lock open, and takes one final look back. And what he sees is shocking. The man has completely disappeared. Then Dave pushes the door open, runs out to the car, starts the engine, puts the vehicle in reverse, and drives the hell out of there. And he doesn't stop driving again until he arrives at the house of the family members he was visiting.